Hey there, and welcome to the She Calls Her Shots podcast. Every week, we chat through different business building topics that will help you gain clarity around your goals, find inspiration in your journey, and also help you create a life and a business that you love. My name is Krista, and I'm a wedding and brand photographer and your go-to no-fluff business coach. In these episodes, we talk through both the tactical strategies, habits, and the mindset work that will help you take those really big leaps. And we always focus on the real talk and the behind the scenes of what it takes to create a sustainable and a thriving business. Because let's be honest, the work isn't always glamorous, but it's always worth it. So girlfriend, let's make some moves and start calling our own shots. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the She Calls Her Shots podcast. Thank you so much for being here. At the time that this is being released, we are smack dab in the middle of the holiday season. So whether you are just having a couple of minutes or an hour for yourself, some me time, or maybe you're doing the laundry or baking or cooking or, whatever it is, wherever you might find yourself right now, and whenever you might be listening, maybe you're tuning in after the holidays. Just first of all, thank you so much for being here. And I'm excited for this episode today because I have Meg Burrage with me on the podcast, and we're going to really talk through how to launch, whether it's a course or a membership or a program that you want to put out into the world. Meg is going to go through her 8 core pillars and questions to ask yourself to figure out what type of program would be best for you to put out into the world. And also, she helps break it down to figure out what type of launch would match with your current lifestyle and the season that you're currently in. And if you've been a listener of the podcast for more than a minute, you'll know that I am such an advocate for making sure that we are doing things that are in alignment for where we are right now and the season that we're in, and honoring the time, the energy, the resources, and everything that we have to be able to not only give and pour into our business, but also back into ourselves and into our personal lives and into our family and our friends and our other values and things that really matter to us. So to give you a little bit of context, Meg is an Australian mom of 3. She's also an Emerald Kajabi Partner, and so she helps female course creators to both plan and execute their launches. And like I said, she does it in a way where she wants to help you make sure that it's in line with your lifestyle and your personality. So we're going to dive into today her 8 pillars. And again, there's 8 pillars and kind of 8 questions to ask yourself to figure out which one fits best for you. So whether you've been thinking about launching a new program, maybe you recently launched one and you're feeling like you want to tweak it, maybe into the new year, you want to make some changes, or maybe you just realize after your first launch or a recent launch that something isn't working and you want to try to figure out how to shift it and do it differently, I think that this episode will be really helpful for you. So all of that said, let's go ahead and dive right into our conversation with Meg. Hello, Meg. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, hello, Krista. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, I'm so excited to chat today. Meg and I were just talking a little bit before we hit record, and I know that this episode is going to be a good one, especially because we're going to be talking through really kind of that blend and that intersection of like building a business and like having a life that you also enjoy. So I'm excited for the conversation that we'll have today. But before we dive into that, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, let us get to know you a little bit and all of that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, where do I start? I'm an Australian. You might be able to pick it up from the accent. And I'm a Kajabi coach, and I help people launch their online programs usually. So whether it's courses or memberships, I'm a mum of 3. Living over in the Netherlands currently, not particularly loving the Netherlands, but that's a whole nother story. And I started with a business that was nothing to do with this. It ended up failing, actually. My first ever business was creating co-working spaces for parents. So it was like co-working with nannies, and I thought it was just like the best invention ever. I knew nothing about marketing, and I absolutely killed myself trying to make this business work, which is why I'm so passionate about what I do now and helping people create programs that actually work around their lifestyle and is something that they will enjoy doing.
Yeah, I love that so much. Yeah, it's hard. I always talk about people with this too, because it's like, isn't it so funny that we embark on this business journey really knowing like none of these things? Like none of us are, I mean, some, I have spoken to some people and I'm always in awe when someone's like, oh, I came from an actual like marketing background or sales background. And I always think to myself, like, man, what an incredible leg up I feel like you had, because I also like knew nothing. I went to school for human resources and like business, but like I say that with air quotes because like what does that even mean? So yeah, I love it, and I love that you're open to talking about that too, because it's like, yeah, sometimes we just have ideas. I've had similar things where it's like you launch something and you're like, this isn't really what I thought it was going to be. So.
No, it took me a long time to work out that having a great idea just amounted for about 10% of what I needed. And the other 90% was actually marketing my great idea.
Yeah.
And, just now, years after the first business collapsed, I actually had someone reach out to me yesterday by email and say, is that business still running? I really need a co-working space with a nanny. And I was like, oh, I'm very sorry, but I did a terrible job at marketing it. And nobody came, and no, it doesn't exist anymore.
Oh,
And
that's
I
still
live on the
nice
other
though. It's
side
like
of the
it is a
world.
little validating though of like, well, the idea was good though. At least
Yeah.
like, I know that
It was
was there.
it was ahead of its time, Krista. I
Yeah.
tell myself now, if it had been after COVID, when people were
Yeah.
used to working remotely, oh, it would have taken off for sure.
At another time, maybe. But I'm really excited. I know I'm excited to dive kind of right into the topic because I know we've got quite a few things that we want to talk about. But obviously, there's such an importance around, of course, being a mom of three. You of all people would understand this, like being able to build a business around a lifestyle that you also love. I know that for me, I can sometimes get so kind of like drawn into business that it's like all consuming. And sometimes I'm like, oh, this feels really good. And then other times I realize like, oh, I've literally put everything else aside. And like, it's like so important to take that time before launching a new thing, before, starting a new idea, to really kind of get clarity around like certain things that we want to make sure that like, okay, this time I'm going to make sure I'm not just like living and breathing this business and like everything else gets pushed to the side. So yeah, I know you have kind of some core pillars that you walk through with your clients if someone is looking to launch a program or, like launch something new. So I'd love for us to just kind of dive into those pillars and kind of talk through what they are.
Yeah, sure. And I came up with these because so many of the students that I have inside my programs who are trying to create online courses are trying to do it in the way that their favorite, I'm going to call them guru, their favorite guru told them to, and it's such an easy trap to fall into when you're just starting. You latch onto somebody and they made a lot of money and they're very successful and you want to be like them and they tell you to do it in a certain way and you just decide that that must be the only way. And it takes a while, I think, of doing this sort of work before you realize that almost any way will work if it's executed properly, and that it just becomes so important to come up with a business model that works for you. And I have put together, a few pillars over time where, I'm chatting to people and I'm like, well, have a think about these aspects before you decide on whether or not you should be doing a course or a membership, or should it be evergreen or run live a couple of times a year, because there are so many options available and so many factors that come into play. The first pillar I have for you, Krista, is clarity. And I see this one hold people up all the time. They decide that they want to create an online program, but they're very hazy about what the program's going to be, what'll be in it, how it's going to be structured, what are the modules going to be, and they just go round and round in circles for months, really getting nowhere at all. So I always say to my students, guys, if you are not clear on the program you're creating, please start with a mini course that will be, relatively easy to put together, rather than this ginormous signature program that's going to take you 12 months plus, and who knows if you will ever get it off the ground.
It's so funny because as you're saying that, so when I when I first, so I worked full time growing my photography business on the side for 10 years. And when I officially decided I was going to go full time, I thought that at the time I was going to go into education, but in the form of like actually teaching like photography and like teaching like photography like principles. And it's so funny because as you're saying this, one of the last big purchases I made while I had a full time job was a big course creator program. And so I like dove into that when I was full time into my business thinking this is going to be what it is. And you're exactly right in that like I definitely should have thought about it in a smaller sort of form because I was like brainstorming all these things of what all these modules and things were going to be. But I realized as I was doing it, I'm like, well, does this go here? Do I want to talk about this? Is this important? And then I kept just moving things around and like, and then I kept going through the course thinking that, oh, maybe like over time I'll like get more clarity. But then you start getting into the weeds of like how to create it. And I'm like, oh, I guess I do need to like know all of this ahead of time. So as you're saying it, I'm like, oh, yep, I've been there. I 100% relate with that.
I've been there too, Krista. I mean, when I first started, I just, I knew nothing about online courses until I went through one of the big courses and thought, oh yes, here is my ticket out of corporate. I am going to create an online course. And I was just not getting anywhere with that. I had all this knowledge from the failed business that I thought I can put that into a business startup course where, that will help other people not fail. Mm-hmm. And just trying to work out the modules, oh goodness, it was going to be like 2030 before I got this course off the ground. And thankfully a coach just tapped me on the shoulder and said, just park that. If you really want to get out of corporate, like right now, come up with a service that you can offer to
like
people.
Right now.
Yeah, right now. What are you good at? And just do that.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent advice. So,
it's so nice. It's so nice when you can have that person that's like, this is a great idea and let's do this at a point when like you're not actually trying to make big life decisions like based on this brand new thing that you've never done.
Absolutely. And, the coming from corporate leads me into my second pillar, which is how much available time do you actually have to get your program up and running? Because you would know, Krista, that when you put together like a big signature program, that is a very time-intensive project. I mean, it's millions of hours just building out sales pages and writing email sequences and preparing launches. So I ask people to think about, is your online program going to be a side hustle while you extract yourself from corporate? Or maybe you like your day job. Maybe you want to stay there. Or is it actually a full-time gig that you're going to do all year round? Or is it seasonal where, you've got maybe kids and during school term, you've got plenty of time, and then during vacation, you are completely unavailable. So you need to work out what kind of program fits with your schedule. And I think if it's a side hustle and you've got a day job that you're happy to keep or not leaving anytime soon, then evergreen or on-demand programs work quite well for that. Whereas if you're planning to throw yourself into it full time and you've got all the time in the world and you can give ongoing support to your students, then group coaching programs and memberships are great. And if it's seasonal, you've only got time maybe during school term, but not during holidays, then think about a live launch and like a live program that runs over set dates for 6 to 8 weeks, because you can launch it, you can run it, and then you can walk away from it for a few weeks or even a couple of months in my case and just, take a break.
Yeah, I love that. And it's also like recognizing, because I think one of my big things too, even though when I was creating this, which I should add that I started creating this, I think I was maybe a month and a half. I think I did this for about a month and a half. And then I actually realized two things. One, this was too much and probably a bad idea. And two, but I also realized that, you know what, I don't even think I want to teach photography. And it was kind of this big moment of like, oh no. So then this whole initial idea that I had, I was like, well, I'll park this course until I actually have something that I really feel excited and passionate about teaching. But I think one of the hard things for me too is even though I was full-time in my business, I was still, it's like recognizing how much available time you have and also just recognizing how much time it'll probably take to get something that you really love out there. Because I think in my head, I wanted to like get something out really quickly. And I think there's like a time and space. If you're not doing like a whole full on like 12 module course, you can probably create like a mini course pretty quickly. But it's also, yeah, just like recognizing your timeline that you have in your head of like when you think this is going to go live. Because if you're expecting to launch something pretty quickly, like maybe start with something that's like on the smaller side that you can like just like get out there and get going and like see the feedback, see how it goes in the process.
Absolutely. And I think, if you are planning to launch it quickly, you're very good at leading me into my next pillar, Krista. My next pillar to consider is finances. What sort of money do you have behind you to actually spread word of your program once you've built it? And people like to just not think about this. It's like, I'm just going to stick my head in the sand and, not worry about that. I'm just going to build my program and then I'll figure out the rest later. But there's really only so many ways that you can drive traffic to your sales page, into your launches, through your funnels. And one of those ways, one of the easiest ways, but it costs money, is paid ads. If you're starting from scratch, you've got no audience, you've got no industry partners who are going to spread the word to their audiences, then you might need a bit of money behind you to actually get the word out, or your course might just go down as the industry's best kept secret, which would be incredibly sad. Now, not everyone has money, so I say to the people who are launching on a shoestring that I'd encourage them to consider live launching, because if you're live launching, it brings its own energy, and it's got a date and you can talk about it organically on your social channels and people can share it for you because it's happening at a set time. Whereas if it's evergreen, it's sort of around like all year. You need to be constantly driving traffic through evergreen funnels, and you have to have some pretty robust marketing strategies to go with that, and usually some paid ad spend. Now, if you do have money behind you, evergreen funnels are fantastic. You could just be forever running ads to your evergreen webinar and into your evergreen program, and sitting on a beach and watching sales come in. But usually those evergreen funnels do take a bit of money to see the results that you're expecting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And I love that in the beginning you mentioned that there's like no one right way necessarily. Because I also think sometimes in like, especially in the online course world, it's like, and I saw this when I was starting to do my research into things, it was like people would kind of sell you. I remember hearing this one person who was like, if you're first launching, you absolutely can't like do it this way or can't do this. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm like, it just felt like such a strong opinion. So knowing that there's maybe not necessarily a right or a wrong way, I'd love to hear kind of going back, I guess, in the last point and this point combined between like evergreen versus live launches versus like for someone who's like just starting off, who's thinking about doing something. I imagine there's probably some pros and cons to both and like some things to think about. I'd love maybe just if you have like a few points that you could share for someone who's kind of like on the fence between like, am I even capable of doing something like that if I've never done this before?
Yeah. For me, I think if you're just starting out, like I would highly encourage you to start with a live program, because otherwise you just don't get that feedback from your students. If you try and put together an evergreen webinar and you've never run it live and then you run ads to it and it doesn't convert, you've got no idea why that evergreen webinar didn't sell your program. So when people are looking at different launch strategies, I would always usually encourage a live webinar or running a live challenge where, you get the opportunity to connect with your audience and actually get the feedback, present your offer, see what questions come up. Does it hit the mark or did you completely miss, and you might have to go back and redo and relaunch a few times before you're like, I finally honed in my messaging to the point where people understood the value of my program and signed up. And it can be so disheartening at the beginning, to launch your program to crickets and then to have no students, all the effort that goes into it for no return. So you really do have to be pretty thick-skinned to be like, I'm just going to try again. I'm just going to do it differently and position it differently, and let's just wait a few weeks and try it again. But I would always encourage my new students to go live first, see what works, keep going until something sticks. And at that point, if you want to, you might love live launching, but if you want to, then you can consider turning it into an on-demand evergreen model. For my business, I've always live launched my program, and it's only now, like 3 years in, that I think, this is actually a whole lot of work. Maybe it's almost at the point where I could turn this into more of an evergreen model that people could join whenever they're ready and they could work through it at their own pace.
Yeah, the time and energy that you're putting into each launch, you could just put that into ads at this point because you already have so much clarity around, I know this works, I've done it so many times. And I imagine this is probably the same for the actual program or course itself, like having some sort of live or like one-on-one component so that way you can also get the same kind of feedback while someone's actually like going through the program.
Absolutely. And I think also, if you're going to create a live program, even if you pre-record your modules, which a lot of my students prefer to do, they don't want to have to deliver the training live, but they'll couple it with a weekly live Q&A. And then there's perhaps like a Facebook group where, they can answer questions in between. Having that support, it gives you the feedback, but also enables you to charge a higher price point. If it's just an unsupported evergreen on-demand program, that's, it's great. It'll bring in some sales throughout the year, but you won't be able to charge the same, ask the same price that you would ask on something that has that level of support.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that because I figured that that's probably something that I was curious about, and I imagine is probably also curious to our listeners. So awesome. So we talked about clarity, available time, finances, and then we can go ahead and dive into your next one.
And the next one ties in perfectly, which is energy and stability. So for this particular pillar, I ask my students to ask themselves, well, do you want to work your butt off like all year round? Would you prefer big bursts of energy a couple of times a year and then some downtime? Or do you not handle stress very well and you would prefer just to have maybe lower but constant revenues throughout the year without those, peaks of stress that come with live launching? Putting together a live launching is incredibly exhausting. Like anytime I get to the end of a live launch or a challenge, I just feel like I have to go on holidays for 2 weeks. It's like, whew, I'm exhausted. It's time to go on vacation. There's all the dealing with the tech and there's writing the emails and preparing the webinars and the challenges and all those bits and pieces. And it does bring big spikes of revenue, which is great. But then, it brings this sort of slump afterwards when you get to the end of the launch. And it would be so great if you could launch your program and then be like, guys, we're starting in 6 months. Like, I'm just going to take a break now. So have a think about how well you deal with stressful times and just the amount of energy and time requirement that goes into a live launch. If you don't deal with it particularly well, then again, maybe looking at your evergreen models can work quite well if you've got the finances to run the traffic through the evergreen funnels. The evergreen sales don't bring the big peaks of revenue that you'll get with the live launches, but for a lot of people, they quite like the stability. If they just get enough sales each month of their on-demand program at a lower price point, then that keeps a lot of people happy. And you can absolutely do a hybrid of the two. If you're up for a live launch, then I think a great model is to live launch a couple of times a year. And then when the dust settles, you can have this evergreen funnel in place for a smaller mini course or something else that you offer, just bringing in lower levels of revenue to tide you over to the next launch period.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because I having done a live launch in the past before, that was my first time I had ever hired like a copywriter to help me with like the launch email sequence and then putting launch email sequence in a ConvertKit and then like talking about it on Instagram and then bringing people to the page. It was like, it was a lot. And like, I will also share quite honestly that it was like much more of a failed launch than I had hoped that it would be. It was also my first real big launch, so I can't really be surprised at that. But I also was like, I'm going to take a weekend away also just because I need to give myself space to reconnect and ground myself and know that life goes on. So yeah, I appreciate that entire message.
I mean, we've all had failed launches too, and I still have them now. Where I'll get through a live challenge, a 5-day challenge, and I'll present my offer, and I'll expect the sales to come in, and I'll be like, I've only had 3 signups, and like this time last round I'd had like 20. Something did not go right, and I thought this past week was great, you know. So I get very good now at actually just changing my offer or bringing in added bonuses, like at the last minute, you know, in the 11th hour. I'm like, okay, based on the feedback I got this week, what do I think this audience actually wants if they don't want what I just put in front of them? And I just start bringing in these like cart close bonuses to get them over the line right at the last minute.
Yeah, I love that. Hey there, just interrupting briefly to mention that if you're really enjoying this episode, you'll probably also love being on my email list. Each week, I send out tips and resources and inspiration to make building your business feel more fun. We dive deeper into the podcast episodes, we share relatable and sometimes embarrassing stories about the real life behind the scenes of being a business owner. And I love to share tips and resources to help make the journey feel a little easier and a little bit more enjoyable. So head on over to KristaMarieLynch.com and enter in your info to join.
Now, my next pillar is actually based around the audience that you're working with and what their experience level needs to be in order to take your program. Because, you know, often we are working with beginners, but sometimes we're not. And if you're creating a kind of program where you think that people need like a foundational level of knowledge before they join your program, then I've got a few suggestions. I think if you're going to do a program for beginners, and you can absolutely focus on a signature program that it just encompasses the A to Z of your topic. If they need to have a foundational level of knowledge before they start, then if it's the first program I'm creating, I'd create firstly just an introductory mini course before I get started on the signature program. And that way I can sort of roll people into the signature program once they've graduated the mini course. And for the people out there who are like, well, I don't want to run a course, I want to run a membership, but people need to have a base level of understanding before they'll get much out of the membership, then I think you could either, again, create a little introductory mini course that you give away as an included bonus with the membership, and you get everyone to work through that first before they get into the membership content. Or you can actually start with a signature program, and I find this works so well for launching a membership, is to precede it with a signature program that has a feeling of community with it. You know, often I've got like a 3-month program. By the time people get to the end of my 3-month program, they're such good friends. They're like, what do we do now, Meg? You know, like, is there a membership that we can move into? We don't want to leave these people. This is our new family. So launching a membership is so easily done if you actually start it with a program beforehand.
Yeah, and I've having had some experience with this, I know those are kind of like the back, I forget what they call them. There's like
back end membership.
Yeah, like the front facing, like front end membership where it's like, oh, this is open to anybody. And then there's kind of like the more closed off, like back end one where it's like you go through this first. You can't actually join unless you go through this, and then you get kind of like automatically invited into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. And they are like, memberships are such a great, it is, if you have something that like you go through all these pillars, you fully understand what it is that you're doing, you have clarity around it, like they can be such a great space of like building that community and like having those people that you just like have in your corner that you can like help educate and help teach and like help like support and build, you know, whatever it is that they're building. Having been a part of a few memberships, like they are, like, they're just such a great thing to have.
I wouldn't enter into a membership lightly as the creator, just because it is this open-ended thing, you know? It's like there is no end date on this membership that you are signing yourself up for. So you really have to be committed to the process and feel like, yes, a membership is where it's at for me. I am happy to be giving support every month, you know, monthly coaching calls, moderating a community, and we're going to do this forever and ever and grow this membership to a, you know, huge size. But, you know, if you're a bit hesitant about, I don't know if I want to do it, you know, past 12 months, then I'd probably give it maybe a second thought.
Yeah. Stick to something that's more like an online course. And I can speak to that because I actually had a membership, and I was actually truthfully very excited about having that be a thing that I could pour into. I think the thing that I got stuck on though was the marketing and launching and like getting people into the membership was the biggest struggle for me.
Yep.
So that was an idea that I had to park after kind of doing it for a while and be like, okay, maybe we'll revisit this again in the future. But like clearly this just like wasn't the right thing for me to be doing right now, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like it's like kind of figuring out, and I don't think there's anything wrong either. Like if you think that you want to do something like that, starting with something like a course, because you're still going to be teaching something that you would likely be teaching inside of the membership too. So then like building that community, kind of getting your feet wet into like marketing and like getting it out there without that commitment of like, now I have to show up no matter what, like every single week or every single month.
You know, and I've always shied away from running my own membership because of that feeling in the back of my head, like this, I'm going to have to do this, you know, month on month on month, I'm never going to get a break. And so I have instead this quite long course. But what I found is that these students, you know, they become such good friends because they're with me for such a period of time that they don't want to let me go and I don't want to let them go. So they end up coming back through my course over and over again. Like I've had students who are with me for 3 years and I'm like, I may as well call it a membership because these people don't leave. You know? It's just a different name for it. A really long course that, that somehow resembles a membership.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that leads me into my next pillar, which is the support structure and how much support you're prepared to give. You know, are you happy to do weekly calls with your students and maybe even have a private Facebook group or something that you're moderating? If you're happy to do that, then I think you can definitely look at a high ticket signature program, because if you're going to launch, you know, a program that's $2,000, $3,000, people do expect that, you know, that they're going to get the live calls and the hot seats and somewhere where they can go and ask their questions in between. If you're happy to do it in an ongoing capacity, not just for 6 to 8 weeks, but, you know, forever and ever, then perhaps a membership could work great. It doesn't have to be necessarily weekly calls with a membership. I've got plenty of students who would do just a monthly check-in call with their membership students or members. Still, you've got to have the community that you're going to moderate, because that's the most important part of the community, and the reason that people are actually staying with the membership will be that community element. And then if you don't really have the appetite or the time to be getting on calls or moderating a Facebook group, then I'd be looking at the on-demand options. You know, what sort of little mini courses, bite-sized courses and programs can you create that people can just work through at their own pace, and if they need any help, they can just shoot you an email.
Yeah, I love that. That's definitely, when I was creating the membership, I was like, oh, it'll be so fun to have both. But it's also, I think, recognizing too that, like, again, the community aspect might take a little bit of time. And of course it depends on like your launch. It depends on how many people join, but it's like curbing expectations. I think that's one thing I wish I would have done a little bit sooner, is like, okay, like it might be a community of like 2 people and I'm going to be okay with that. And then it'll grow and then it'll get bigger over time. And then having those other things where it's like, but there's so many other things that they can also, it's not like there's like just the one aspect of it. There's like also the little mini courses, or also like, you know, these other things that they can consume and like coaching calls and stuff like that.
Yeah. And it is a tricky thing, isn't it? Launching a membership with only a couple of people. It's like, oh, sort of imagined I was going to have this community and I've gone through my launch and there's only 3 of us. It's like, well, yeah, they're getting extra special attention from you. Tell them it's almost like private coaching.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Tell them it's growing. Just tell them not to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. On to my 7th pillar. We've got 2 to go. Not far to go, Krista. You're doing well. All right. So the 7th one I have for you is your appetite for being in the spotlight. Does the idea of running a live webinar or a challenge just like send you weak at the knees and make you basically feel a little bit nauseous? Because you don't have to run live webinars and live challenges in order to sell your programs. And a lot of people get so hung up on this, you know, they're just petrified of going live on social media, and they have been told that this is the only way you will sell your program is to show up live. And it's just not the case. You know, there really is an audience for every creator out there. And there are plenty of people who would love to join you in your program who also don't like the idea of showing up on webinars or participating in challenges or turning up live on social. So you just need to find your kind of person, you know, someone who resonates with you. And even through writing, you know, I've got plenty of students who just love to write. They write wonderful blogs and books and then create courses based on their book. And just giving away a chapter of their book has sold their course, you know. So there's plenty of things that you can do that don't involve turning up live on social. But if you do like being in the spotlight, you know, it's happy to be the point of a pinnacle of attention for the whole week, then perhaps live launching could be great. I mean, it can be a bit of fun once you get over the stress of it and work out how to streamline your launches. You know, if you're good in front of the camera, or you think you could be eventually, then I would encourage you to give live launching a go, because there are so many benefits. You know, it's growing your audience and helping you to really become an authority in your area if you're happy to show up on video, on social, on webinars.
Yeah, I know when I did mine, I actually really enjoyed it. I created like a training with like slide decks, and people would like register for it, and then it was a Zoom link, and then we all joined on Zoom, and then I taught it for like 3 days in a row for like whatever it was, like 30, 45 minutes. And it was a little nerve-wracking but I think at that point I'd had a little bit of practice. I was comfortable enough speaking in front of like smaller groups of people. I think the podcast has helped a lot with that. But I've also seen people do, like, I've gone through like email launches where it's like every day they'll like send you the email, or there might be like a little video that's included in the email, but it's like pre-recorded and you can just like watch it. And then there's like a Facebook group you can participate in and ask questions. Like, so the person is there, but like it's like doesn't have to have the same amount of pressure of like, oh, I have to like show up and just like teach or like, you know, talk on the spot.
Yeah, and if you've got like a really engaged audience who almost just hang off your every word, they will sign up for your stuff, even if you do not go to all the effort of a big live launch. I mean, I'm on somebody's email list at the moment, and you know, I love this guy. He's so good at teaching, and you could just, if you look inside his brain, like he's just so clever. It's like, just teach me everything you know, Jack. You're amazing. And he sent out this email a couple of days ago that just said, I'm thinking about beta launching this program on evergreen launches. Just wondering if you guys would be interested. Like, that was basically his entire sales strategy. And I'm sure most of his list just responded and said, sign me up. You know, I don't know what he's charging, but I'm in. You know, just where's the link to pay?
Yeah, it's amazing when you can build, like, I mean, that's a whole different conversation of like email marketing and building any way that you can build like that warm list of audience. I mean, that's going to be like one of the best things you can do for any future launches that you have.
All right, my last and final pillar for you, Krista, is how much of a perfectionist are you? Are you one of those people who feels like they have to pre-record all their video content and edit it and get the workbooks done, and the slide decks have to be perfect, and there's no possible way that you could bring yourself to sell your program until all those pieces are in place? Now, I've got a lot of students who are like that, and if that is you and you can't move past it, then I would say please start with a mini course, because trying to get all those pieces in place for a big signature program will take you absolutely forever. And you might find after you've gone to all that effort that the program you created is not actually what people wanted, because you didn't manage to get any feedback along the way. So if you've got that perfectionism trait, I'd suggest start with a mini course so you can get the feedback, and then from there you can look into building out your bigger programs. If maybe your content is something that you can teach live, so you don't actually have to pre-record any training, that's going to save you lots of time. You could absolutely start with a group coaching program or a membership, and I think it takes a lot of the pressure off if you happen to be teaching on a topic where you can just turn up and teach it live. I think if you know that, you know, you want to pre-record the content, but if you wait for it to all be perfect, then the chances are you are never going to launch this thing. Then the way that I like to do it, my preferred method, as long as I'm clear on the program that I'm going to be building, I get clear, I write out on a piece of paper the modules, what the outcomes will be from each topic. And then as soon as I'm clear on it, I create the sales page. I put my launch together. I sell my program that I haven't built. And then I make sure that between the end of the launch and when the program actually gets started is at least 2 weeks. And then I go away and I put together modules 1 and 2. And then I just make sure for the duration of the course that I stay 1 week ahead of all my students in the program. And for me, that works best. We call it monetize before you make it. And you would be amazed at how motivated you are to get your content done once people have paid you for it. You're like, oh, haven't built it yet. Okay, head down, bum up, gotta get all this done, in the next couple of weeks. So you become very focused once people buy your program if it's not yet built.
Yeah, and I imagine that would work really well because, like you said, you have that deadline. So it's like, it's not, because I feel like, and I felt a little bit of this when I was like initially thinking about creating the course, was I was like, oh, well, I have all the time in the world. Like I can wait and do all this stuff, but then you lose motivation, you lose excitement around it. Like you lose all these things. So I can definitely see the benefits of, I've already launched this. I already know people want this, so it's like validating in that sense, and now I just need to like give myself the space to be able to like go and create it so that way they can actually consume it. So I can definitely understand why that would be a preferred method.
Yeah, and if it makes you feel better, you can let everyone know that it's the beta launch, that you're going to be taking in their feedback each week. The content's going to be dripped. You're co-creating it with them, and the feedback that they give you is helping you to shape it for the final end version, and give them a bit of a discount or an added bonus.
Yeah. I feel like people love that. When they can be a part of the journey and feel like they're like a part of creating something, it's like that's going to create a different type of energy in itself.
Absolutely. I think beta programs are always the most fun, where people know that they are those early adopters and that you really value their opinion and you're sort of just building it together.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And I think these are so important because I do think, especially myself, a lot of my listeners, like we do, we kind of are like multi-passionate entrepreneurs, and it can be so easy to get an idea, to like want to jump on it and to just immediately kind of like, well, this is what so-and-so did. And so like, I'm just going to do that. So I love that we talked about this because this is like really, just giving yourself that time and that space to be able to work through these questions and like get really honest with yourself of like, okay, like, let's just like take a day to like really go through this and figure out like what would be the actual best way for me to move forward before I like jump in and overcommit to something that maybe I am not actually ready for. So
absolutely. Well, hopefully there were a few tips in there that people can take away and think on. Might help them with a little bit of clarity if they're stuck on what to do first.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I will end this with just kind of one final question. I always love to ask this of, is there anything like whether it's, a book, a resource, something that you've consumed or seen, or it could even be like a business practice that you implemented, like something that you feel like has been like a really big like game changer for you in your business that you always love to share with others?
Okay, a recent one for me would be the book Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. Now,
Yeah.
I'm a certified story brand guide, which cost me a small fortune, Krista, and I read the book recently after becoming a guide and thought, I feel like everything I just paid for was actually in that book. That book is amazing at helping you just get really clear on your messaging, on your marketing, how to create your website, and just lay it out in such a way that it connects with your audience without overcomplicating things. There are so many beautiful websites out there, but having a beautiful website doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to convert to program sales. And the story brand framework just does such a good job of simplifying it, and just making it very obvious to the website visitor what they're supposed to do next, and I see so many websites with so many words on them and so many offers that you hop onto the website and then you almost immediately jump back off because you're like, oh, that was way too overwhelming. I'm out. So I think if anyone is sort of just getting started with building their website, keep it simple. Go and read Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, and it will give you plenty of good ideas as to how you can structure out a website that actually converts your web traffic.
Yes, I love that book. It's so tactical. It's really one of those, I always tell people, I'm like, sit down with like either your computer or like pen and paper and like be ready to take notes. It's not one of those like leisure books that you're just like, oh, I'll read this. Like it's like you're learning a ton as you go through it. So, well, Meg, this was so wonderful. Thank you so much again for coming on, and let us know where can we find you, connect with you, kind of share, any next steps that for anyone that's interested in kind of connecting with you further.
Okay. Well, you can absolutely come on over to my website, which is just megburrage.com, and you'll find a little quiz there, which I have created on these 8 pillars that we've talked about today, just to help you work out what kind of program might work best. And if you happen to be building a website on Kajabi, you'll find all sorts of free resources there, trainings, templates, bits and pieces to get you up and running as quickly as possible.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you again so much. This was just such a joy.
Thank you so much for having me on. I absolutely love your podcast, Krista, and look forward to listening in to the next episodes.
Thank you so much. One last thing before you go. I'd absolutely love it if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. Or if you've already left a review, I'd love for you to share this episode with your business bestie. I love getting to shout out my listeners on the show, and the more listeners that we have, the more that I can help others create a thriving and sustainable business too. Thank you so much again for being a part of this community, and I can't wait to hear your takeaways from today's episode.